Good afternoon, all. Welcome to Blue Banyan Books for a delightful afternoon launching our very first memoir, From the Heart, Family Community Service by Marianne Chambers. We are especially delighted to present this book to you guys this afternoon. And for this, we have selected a very awesome host, Mr. Daniel Edwards, who will do the invitation and the hosting for the interview and the hosting for us this afternoon. I am going to give you a little introduction to this very awesome man. Daniel T. Edwards is the owner and founder of the Caribbean's first and only lifestyle brand, designed around three pillars: aspiration, motivation, and transformation. P180 was created to productively combine his three passions: personal development, wellness, and psychology. A trained public speaker and presenter, Mr. Edwards launched a series of T180 workshops in 2017, the first being through corporate client Sagicor Life Insurance Jamaica Limited. In September of 2018, he took the bold step of launching the Caribbean's first and only men's lifestyle YouTube channel, which is now transitioned into a personal development hub for all. In 2019, he launched Long Story Short, Jamaica's first and only monthly storytelling showcase experience. In September 2021, he became one-third of a transformational group called We Three Kings, along with Kevin Wallen and Marlon Burbridge. Just last year, he made his authorial debut in the Amazon.com #1 best-selling book, We Are the Sacred Masculine Rising. This book shares the story of 8 international male authors' journey through self-discovery, healing, and transformation. Tonight, Blue Banyan Books proudly invites Mr. Daniel Edwards to not only join us, but to host the afternoon. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor.
We are especially delighted to have you this afternoon, Daniel.
Thank you.
But I'm giving you a very hard task this afternoon because our guest is truly incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know where to start introducing her because there is just so much to say, but I'm going to leave that job for you this afternoon, Daniel. It's going to be a heavy task, but I know you can manage. All right, now I'm going to introduce the one and only Marianne Chambers. After retiring early as a senior vice president at Scotiabank, one of Canada's largest financial institutions, Marianne ran successfully for political office and was appointed a cabinet minister in the province of Ontario. For more than 3 decades, she has served on the boards of several nonprofit organizations with a primary focus on education, health, community building, and international development, sometimes at the level of chair or vice chair. In April 2022, Marianne was named the University of Guelph's 10th Chancellor. She's also on the board of Grace Kennedy Limited, a global food and financial service group of companies with Jamaican roots. Marianne Chambers is Jamaican born. She's Jamaican by birth, guys, but she's extraordinary by choice. Tonight, it is an extreme honor for Blue Banyan Books to invite Marianne Chambers to our launch of her memoirs, From the Heart, Family Community Service. Marianne, welcome.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you for having me. And hello, Daniel.
Hello, Marianne. This is exciting. So let me tell you a brief story. So Tanya Batson Savage reached out to me about this opportunity. And while she was explaining, I was just like, I need to do this. I didn't even know what she was asking me for properly. I am an avid reader turned avid listener. I only do audiobooks. So I went back to the old school and read an analog book. It was amazing. I've been immersed in it for the last 2 weeks. And I was just rearing to have the opportunity to have a discussion with you. So this is a great honor.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I want to start off by asking you, what compelled you to write and release your autobiography to the world?
So Daniel, I think it all started in 2007, so a long time ago, when people wanted me to write. And that was when I had decided not to seek re-election. I thought maybe they wanted me to write about, you know, the spicy, scandalous kinds of things they think of when they think of politics.
Yes.
I wasn't interested in that. I just feel that those kinds of books have very little shelf life. They don't sustain themselves. They don't necessarily even impact people's lives. It's pure entertainment. And so I said no. I said no for several years. And as time went by, people kept asking me to write. And it got to the point where what I was hearing was, what can we learn from you? As you have taken, how can you help us there, kind of thing. So that was completely different, and I appreciated that, because I have, as far back as I can remember, experienced fulfillment in helping other people to achieve their potential. And so, you know, with that kind of ask, I really had to think about how it might be a benefit to others. And it turned out to kind of be my COVID project.
Okay.
So as you know, lifestyles had to be adjusted to meet COVID protocols, and people were not, you know, leaving home as much. I thought, well, maybe it's time. And then, you know, as you get older, you kind of think, well, if you don't do things now, is there a risk that you won't be able to do it again? When I mentioned to my family that I was going to do it, my granddaughters, for example, said, we wondered why you hadn't done it already. And so I realized that maybe there was an appetite, a need, a desire. And so I got to it.
Okay. All right. So you say you definitely want this to be of assistance to people. Let's go in more specifics. What exactly would you want the impact? The impact what impact would you want this to have on readers? And what are your expectations of the readers who read this book and engage with it?
Okay. What I've been hearing from people who have read it so far is, what I've been hearing most often is the word inspiring. And I'm happy about that, because that was what I hoped it would be. As I wrote, as I thought about some of my experiences, I wanted it to provide hope and be inspiring. Anybody in any age group. And so I'm very happy to hear from people that they are finding it to be that way.
Yeah, I found it inspiring. I did find it, I mean, unusual. It really was an unusual story. This is a story that exemplifies Caribbean excellence, female excellence. I saw some of the Canadian dream coming out in there too. But take me back in time to your childhood now.
Okay.
Of little baby Marianne. Take me back there. Take me back to Jamaica in that time.
Okay. So just before I do that, to the comment that you just made about it being unusual, my publisher, who also has Jamaican connections, I thought said it really well. He said that my story poked the eyes of several stereotypes.
Mm.
And he thought that that was really important.
Mhm.
He actually said that we have so many trauma books, and
Yes.
we don't have enough stories that challenge the stereotypes, and that's really important, especially in the life that I live, in the environment that I live, where, for example, young Black people wonder what their futures might be, and whether or not they'll be able to achieve their potentials. Okay, so back to the roots, if you like. So I was born in Jamaica, as has been mentioned. I think I grew up close to where you grew up, Danielle. I grew up on Deanwood Road in Vineyard Town.
Look at that.
Yeah, I was baptized at St. Teresa's Church, which was right across the road from where my parents' home was at the time. Went to St. Teresa's prep school. Loved being there. Always felt a sense of the expectations that people had of me. I sometimes say it might be because I was tall for my age, and taller people seem to give the impression that they're leaders.
Yes.
And there tends to be greater expectations of them. I was the one at school who would take orders for lunch, and I would be on the phone with the caterer to say, this is what we need. And if there were problems, they were mine to address. These were important responsibilities when we, as Catholic children, there are certain routines, if you like, that I grew up with. I went to confession on Saturdays. It didn't matter whether or not I had sinned. I was of the impression I was supposed to go to confession on Saturday, because if I wasn't forgiven for everything that I didn't even realize I had done, I wouldn't be able to go to communion on Sunday, right?
Yes.
So I had a little notebook where I would try to make notes so that I wouldn't forget what I thought I might have done wrong. Became a bit of a routine after a while. I'm sure I was in a good place. I went to Sunday school. I was taught that we were intended to be social beings. We're intended to look after each other. I do not consider myself to be very, very religious, and I certainly don't try to impose my religion on anyone else. But I think it was foundational. I think it helped to define who I was. One of the very, very good memories that I have from when I was a little girl in prep school was how I would spend my summers. I would go with the nuns from my school to Trenchtown to teach children, some of whom would be older than me, to read and write and do simple arithmetic, because they couldn't afford to go to school on a regular basis.
How old are you at this time? When you said
it was prep school. It was
prep school. You were going to Trenchtown to teach.
Yes, with the nuns from my school, and I loved it. And I saw how much they loved having us, and that made quite the impression on me. I was also really very fortunate to have parents who allowed me to get to know how other people live, and it caused me to acquire a very genuine respect for other people, whoever they were. I even remember one day saying to my parents, what do bad people look like? Because I wanted to know if I should cross the road if somebody's coming along, a bad person. And they said they look just like the rest of us. And even that was an eye-opener for me, and helped to define how I treated other people. On Saturdays, many Saturdays, I would take the bus and go to Tom Redcombe Library.
Yeah.
And those were glorious times. I would sit in the corner, on the floor with a little stack of books, and I'd be there until it was time to go. And so I feel that my life as a child growing up in Jamaica was idyllic. I was safe. There's nothing that I feared. National Bakery was in our lives. My siblings and I would drive with our father to go buy bread, and you could tell. I think you still can tell when you're near to the bakery. You can smell the bread.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would huddle in the back seat and we would eat all of the bread before we got back home. We would make little hosts, give each other communion. It was an idyllic life.
Yes. But you understood the responsibility of your privilege, thankfully, because you had good parents.
Absolutely.
So, do you miss Jamaica? And if so, what do you miss about it?
Daniel, the funny thing is, what I miss about Jamaica is the kind of things that I took for granted, and I think Jamaicans take for granted. Things like all year summer.
Mm-hmm.
Things like the smell of the sea.
Yes.
That warm, very comforting breeze from the mountains. I miss Bombay mangoes and Julie mangoes. I miss poinciana trees. It has always amazed me that poinciana trees don't seem to need to have any kind of fertile ground to grow, to bloom beautifully. I miss poinsettias that don't grow in pots, but grow in the ground wild. Things we took for granted.
Yes.
And so again, those are the things I grew up with. I miss the warmth of the Jamaican people. I miss the joyful smiles of Jamaican children who do not realize they are poor. I've made the mistake of visiting basic schools wearing a white shirt and getting back to my hotel and see everybody's fingerprint on the shirt. The hugs, absolutely. So yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to be missed. I enjoy visiting Jamaica, and I feel very fortunate that I have the best of both.
How often do you come home, by the way? How often do you come home?
Well, we vacation in Jamaica probably once a year or once every other year. But I have been coming to Jamaica for the past several years, several times per year for meetings.
Okay.
So I'm very fortunate because I do get to experience the two worlds and the one love.
Yes. So I want to jump into your love life now. This is one of the craziest things in the book now. So I don't know if you want to spill the beans, but let's talk about how you met your husband.
Okay. Well, I met my husband when I started working. I had actually been accepted at UWI. Mm-hmm. My mother's goal for me was for me to be a physician. That wasn't really my dream, but I, went along with the idea and I was accepted at UWI. But when I thought about the length of time that I would be dependent on my parents, I didn't find it very appealing. I'm very, 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 very independent by nature. I don't need to be wealthy, but I need the security of independence. I need to be able to look after myself, and the idea of being dependent on my parents the entire time that I would be in university and medical school was almost scary to me.
Yeah.
And so I did aptitude tests with IBM and NCR and got full marks. And they told me they hadn't seen that before, so I had job offers. And this was supposed to be a summer job, but because it wasn't really all that easy to get summer jobs at the time, I didn't tell them that this was supposed to be a summer job. Yeah. And so I was hired by an IBM customer and sent on a course at IBM, and that's where I met Chris. And for me, it felt like love at first sight. And I guess the rest, as they say, is history.
You're how old? You're how old?
I was 19 when I got married, and we met. We met in August.
Mm-hmm.
We got engaged Christmas Day, and we got married the following June. We got married less than a year after we met.
No, this is unbelievable.
I don't think we had any idea what we were doing. But it's now a little bit more than 52 years, and I have no regrets. I should also tell you that when I was growing up, I was probably the only girl in my class who didn't have a boyfriend. So I went to Immaculate Conception High School.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother in particular was not of the impression that I should have boyfriends. She figured I would get married. I don't know how this was going to happen, Danielle, but boyfriends were not really in the picture. In fact, I was head girl when I graduated, and I didn't even have someone to take me to the prom. My mother went to one of her friends and asked her if her son could take me to the prom. That was the most humiliating experience, I think.
So you compensated by getting married early.
Maybe you're the psychologist, right?
Yeah.
But
I'll get married now. I'll get married.
Fix that future. So and it's unfortunate because it was a nice young man, handsome gentleman, whatever. But I never wanted to see him again after that graduation prom, because it felt like my mother had rented this escort home.
Yes.
But anyway, I really did like Chris, and it seemed like a no-brainer to me, and it has worked.
It has worked. That's the understatement of the year. You guys even look alike.
That's true. That's a lot of people say that. A lot of people say that.
They say couples grow to resemble each other, but you guys look like each other from the gate.
We always did. In fact, there was a co-worker of his who asked him if he would allow him to take his sister out. And
remember that.
His response was, not my sister.
Yeah.
It was kind of.
All right. So you're married now, and you had your first son pretty soon after that.
11 months after we got married.
You can't make this up. 9 months after.
No, 11 months after.
11 months after. Okay. So you transition into Canada. Let's talk about transition into Canada.
Okay. So our sons were 5 and 2 when we moved to Canada. We didn't have plans to leave Jamaica. We were encouraged to apply we were encouraged to come to Canada by a lady who had worked in my parents' home when I was growing up. And when Chris and I got married, she left, saying something to the effect that we didn't need her anymore. And she came to Canada and never gave up trying to convince us that we should apply for visas. And so we applied for visas, figuring that that was not in itself a commitment to move to Canada. We could make that decision when, before when we were successful in securing the visas. But Daniel, that was, you know, as it turned out, that was the time, the era when Jamaicans were starting to feel a little uncertain about the economic climate, the political climate, and the Prime Minister at the time, Michael Manley, who had a relationship with Fidel Castro that made some Jamaicans nervous. He wasn't discouraging. He wasn't discouraging.
First world countries too.
Yes, perhaps. Interesting thing is the Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau, Michael Manley, and Fidel Castro all went to the London School of Economics around the same time. So they were all friends. Yeah. So Canada has had a long-standing, productive and friendly relationship. But we start in the year that it took to get our visas. We started to think about whether or not this was actually something we should do. And by the time we got the visas, we were ready.
You were ready.
So we arrived in Canada, and I made a commitment that Canada would be good for us and we would be good for
I like that.
and you know, it meant doing our best. What's the saying? Grow where your roots are planted. And you know, we are Canadians by choice. It has been good for us, and we have been good.
I like that. Very rarely do you hear the immigrant talking about being good. People come with a kind of extraction mentality. Let me go and just make as much money and just, but how about giving back? You know, and it comes back to you 1,000-fold, as you can see with your career.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your corporate life now in the Scotia Bank.
So I was really, you know, I was really very fortunate. Chris and I were fortunate because, in fact, at that time, information technology skills were in demand.
Okay.
In Canada. So it took me no time at all to be offered a job by Bank. And I said, well, how much time can I take to get my sons, who are 5 and 2, settled into childcare and school, whatever? And they said, well, how much time do you need? And, you know, I thought, well, I'm not going to push my luck here. So I said, can you give me 2 weeks? Because I had just arrived. I mean, this was like the week after we arrived in Canada. And I said, can you give me 2 weeks? And they said, oh, yeah, of course, if that's all you need, kind of thing. At which point I couldn't say, I'd really like to have a month to settle in, you know. So I made 2 weeks work. And I guess those were the good old days, Daniel, when, you know, it wasn't a struggle for us to get a job. Chris was hired by IBM there. So it was pretty smooth. In the first year that I was, in fact, a matter of weeks after I started there, I was sent to Bermuda to do work for the bank there. And in the first year I was with the bank, I was in Bermuda 3 times. Now, my colleagues wished that that was their experience. But I guess the attraction for me was the skills that I had acquired in Jamaica that the bank in Canada did not have. They did not have those kinds of skills because of the different kind of computer technology they were using. So that again worked for me.
Perfectly.
Yeah, except that it wasn't easy being away from my little voice or, for any time at all. In fact, when I was being interviewed for the job in Canada, I was asked how I would feel about traveling on business. And I said, I have no interest in traveling on business because. And the response I got was, you will learn to like it. In other words, they didn't care because they needed me to do this. And a matter of a day or two after that interview, I saw an ad in the Globe and Mail in Toronto for, probably the same job that I got. And the small print said, willingness and ability to travel was essential.
Mm-hmm.
So I could have shot myself in the foot by saying, I have no interest in traveling on this. But I guess they needed me.
So was you right? Did you grow to love it, the traveling?
Not while my boys were little. I always felt I would work, for example, I would work through the night when I was away.
Mm-hmm.
So that instead of having to stay for 2 weeks, I'd only have to stay for a week, that kind of thing, so that I would get home sooner. And then I'd be sick when I got home because I'd really burnt myself out. At least I was home.
Okay.
I liked it more when my sons were teenagers or adults, didn't really seem as much a sacrifice.
Yeah. So tell me some of the places that your work, some of the exotic destinations that your work took you to.
I have traveled a lot. I've traveled, and not just with Scotiabank, but also with my governance work.
Mm-hmm.
I have traveled in South America. I've traveled in the Caribbean. I've traveled in Asia, in Africa, of course, the US. I've bought hardware in India and software in Ireland to computerize the bank's Indian operations. Okay. And so I've had a very interesting life.
Yeah. So did you experience any racism or sexism in your climb up the corporate ladder?
A few weeks after I joined the bank in Canada, I was a programmer, and there was a business analyst, a Canadian woman in the same area. And a few weeks after I joined, she said, I can tell that you are competent and conscientious and you're likely ambitious. So, you shouldn't be disappointed when you don't get very far. And I said, what does that mean? And she said, well, you have so much stacked against you. And I said, like what? I mean, I was obviously very naive, right? But I said, like what? And she said, well, you're a woman, you are Black, you are married, you're a mother, and you're Roman Catholic. Oh, and she said, and you're not Canadian born, you're Jamaican. So this was pretty heavy duty stuff, right? And I went home that night and I thought about it, and I thought, well, there's nothing there that I want to change, even if I could change any of that. So I have two choices. I can either roll over and play dead, or I can ignore what she said. And I decided to ignore what she said. And about 7 years later, So she was Canadian, blonde. She was also a mother. I think she was a single parent. About 7 years after we met, she left the bank, and when she was leaving the bank, she was still a business analyst, and I was in my first management. And you know, Daniel, I never ever thought that she was trying to hurt me. I think that she looked at my realities. These days, that's called intersectionality. Right? All these various things that can be used to define someone. And she probably thought, as she said, I had a lot stacked against me. So she was really trying to manage my expectations. But one of the things I hope my book will help people to understand is nobody else gets to manage your expectations unless you allow them to do so. Right?
Wise words.
So I think that one of the things that has worked for me in life is that I'm very willing and eager to control my destiny and to do, you know, what it takes in honest and professional ways to manage where I find myself and where I want.
Okay, so let's slide to the right and talk about your transition into the university governing council. You know, the service bug bit you as a child and it continued to bite you. So let's talk about that experience and then segue into the political arena.
So I was appointed to the University of Toronto's governing council while I was actually on a fundraising committee for the United Way of Toronto. And someone told me that the government of the day was looking for people who they considered to be visible minorities. I don't use that term effectively because I think it covers such a wide gambit. But they were basically looking for people of color to add to, you know, the people who they could appoint to boards and agencies of the provincial. Exactly. Diverse, right? And so I said, okay, I'm willing to consider that. And they talked to me about two organizations. One was the University of Toronto, and one was the Metropolitan Toronto Convention Center. I thought about it for a little while, and I thought, you know, Metropolitan Toronto Convention Center will probably be. That's not going to be exciting for very long. The University Governing Council, on the other hand, would probably be really complex. And I'd probably be able to learn a lot there. So I chose that. And it was complex. And I did learn a lot. But in a way, it came another step in the path that I found myself taking, even though this was not a path that I had defined upfront. Okay, so in that case, it's a willingness to move outside of our comfort zones and be willing to contribute what you can bring to the table, while also being willing and comfortable. I really appreciated the complexity of the environment. I really liked the people I met, from students to faculty, staff, other people from the business world, whatever. I became pretty attached to some of the students because I found them very, very interesting. I met, for the first time, I met real activists. I remember asking one fellow if his mother knew that this was how he was spending his time at university. And, I encountered my share of protests. I remember sitting in a meeting with a sign behind me that said, "No bankers welcome on Government House."
Wow.
And that was because there was this sense in some quarters that large donors, aka banks or corporates, had influence over the university.
Yes.
That was not my experience at all, but that was the perception of some people. And so, I found myself not being uncomfortable in those settings because I figured they were doing what they thought they needed to do. And I would be interested in hearing why they felt the way they felt, listening to what they had to say.
Mhm. So, politics now, the dark, dangerous, and corrupt landscape of the political arena. What convinced you to step into that space? Was it what you expected it to be? How did you navigate dark infested waters?
Okay, so first of all, it was not my experience that this was a dark, dangerous, or corrupt place. And had that been my impression, I would have said no right up front. It wasn't something that I'd ever thought I would do. For years, people would say, you make a good elected official kind of thing. And I would say, no, you're confusing me with someone else. That's not me. But then I took early retirement from the bank because I wanted to spend more time on my volunteer governance work.
Yes.
And so I didn't have a good excuse. I didn't hear myself when I was asked by the party to run. I couldn't come up with an immediate no. And I took some time to talk with people who knew me from my various involvements, and discovered that people felt that I did have something to offer. And interestingly, one young man, in fact, he was president of the Undergraduate Student Association at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. And I asked him for his opinion. He got really, really serious. His name was Dan. And Dan said, you just don't fit the profile. And I thought, I don't know what that is, but I suspect it's not a good, profile is not a good thing. And he said, but that's why you have to do it. And don't let anyone change you. And I thought that was very profound. So eventually, when my husband agreed, he didn't like the idea to start with. But when he gave me his blessing, and I met with the leader of the party, and I said, there's some things that I just think I'll be able to do well. I will not toe the party line if I think it's the wrong thing. I will not go public with that, but I will say, privately within the party, I don't think that's the right direction. If the other party has a better idea, I'm going to say, I think that's a better idea. I also said that I was not comfortable with the idea of trying to present myself as better than my opponent.
Yes.
I would prefer to just help people to get to know me rather than trying to present myself as better than somebody else. And the third thing was that although I had helped raise funds for charitable organizations, I didn't like the idea of asking people to donate. It would feel like I was asking them to give me money. Well, as it turned out, I didn't have to ask anybody for it. The volunteers came and the money came, and I ran a campaign that finished with no debt. And
Wow.
I had 300 people from, the first week or so come out to work on my campaign. And it was all kinds of people. There was a fellow who was a janitor at the bank. He led the janitorial team, came in to clean the offices at the end of each day. And he did not know that I had retired early from the bank. He just knew I wasn't around anymore. And then one day he was cleaning a workstation and saw one of my candidate cards on somebody's desk. And he phoned my campaign office and said, I want to come and campaign for Marianne, because she was the only executive who would never walk by us without saying hello.
Wow.
And I realized that these little things really do matter. I mean, things that I consider to be little things might be big things to others, especially if they weren't encountering those things on a regular basis. I'm very proud of what I accomplished in government, but it wasn't intended to be a second career. And I basically burned myself out. I needed to get out of there after the first term and take care of my back, take care of my health, get myself back in shape again, because I really did go 100%.
Yeah, you went all in as you do with everything else in your
Absolutely,
life.
absolutely.
What your mantra and your mandate as a politician when you stepped into that space?
I took my lead and my mantra from the ancient political philosophers who defined politics as serving the public good.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
So it wasn't supposed to be about me. It was how I could serve others, how I could serve the public. And I never left that lane. And sometimes I would have to fight even my colleagues to say, no, this is what we said we were going to do. And I am going to make it happen. And I remember one day in cabinet throwing a bit of a tantrum over something that I was getting resistance to from some of my colleagues. And I said, I don't need to be here. I know this is the right thing to do. And you had it in your campaign platform, even before I said running for. So we're going to do it. I'm going to make sure it happens. And at the end of that meeting, the premier asked me to come to his office. So I thought this was pretty early in my time in government. And I followed him into his office thinking that he was going to say no more tantrums kind of thing. But instead, he said, your colleagues don't seem to support this. So now I'm confused as to what it is you want to do. Tell me what it is you're going to do. And I told him. And he said, oh, okay. So you are serving the interests of the public. They are trying to protect their stakeholders. Go do it. Yes. So again, I have never felt that I have to toe anybody else's line if I believe that that something that's to be done, something that I can influence is really important and will serve others well, then I will fight.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my bureaucrats really appreciated it, and we worked very, very well together.
Love it, love it. So I have one more question.
Okay.
So when I read the book, I'm a bad mind, but it does seem to me that you had faced 0 failures in your life.
Oh.
0 failures. Everything you tried has worked. And my question was, is it that you're just remarkably lucky, or is there a secret to your consistent success over the years?
I had a boss at the bank who chastised me when one day I said, you know, I am really lucky. And he said, that's rubbish. We make our own. You know, I still, Daniel, I still do believe that I've been fortunate, and I feel blessed and grateful for that. I wouldn't say that I have never failed at anything. What I would say is that well, first of all, I don't advertise what I have not yet finished. So, you know, in a way, I don't look at things as failures if I just have not been able to accomplish them.
So it's reframing, a lot of reframing.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it has worked for me.
It definitely has. It definitely has.
Yeah, I just keep trying. Yes.
So this was fascinating. I got to even delve deeper into the mind of Marianne Chambers. I think we're supposed to now segue into our question and answer segment. Is that
okay?
Let's hear what the bosses have to say. Tanya, Jean, anybody?
There
oh,
kind of...
oh, I have the questions here. Okay. All right. All right.
Oh, I don't like the sound of that.
All right. At any point, did you feel you had to choose being a mommy or choose between being a mommy or being a full-time working woman?
When my oldest son was about 13, one day out of the blue, he said, you know, you're the only mother amongst all of my friends' mothers who works full-time. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I thought I've gotten through this so far. You know, is this where I come to a halt? And so I said to him, well, how do you feel about that? And he said, if it makes you happy, I am happy. And I thought, thank you, Jesus.
Oh.
And you know, I also did my university studies in Canada with a supportive husband and 2 young boys.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one Saturday morning, I was heading out to a class and I was having breakfast before leaving home. And my younger son said, do you really have to go to class today? And I thought, oh no, I'm not going to lie to him. If I say, yes, I have to, that's a lie, because I don't have to. I want to, but I don't have to.
Mm-hmm. But
if I say, no, I don't have to, then the obvious follow-on question from him would be, well, then stay home.
Mm-hmm.
And I was stuck for an answer, and my husband jumped in and said, yes, she has to go, so leave her alone. And with that, I left the rest of my breakfast and headed out. But the worst one that I still feel so guilty about is, you know, my older son had chickenpox.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the most progressive homes, as I think mine was, the mother takes on the responsibility for staying home with a sick child. My mother hadn't had chicken pox. I couldn't have her coming to our home to take care of the son. So I stayed home from work. Well, when my younger son would come home from school, he would jump into my older son's bed and they would play. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to get chicken pox. I can't stay home for the two of them.
Mm.
So Daniel, I encouraged my older son, and you're going to think really terribly of me now. I encouraged my older son to continue, loving up his dad and playing with his dad while he had his chicken pox.
Mm-hmm.
My husband had never had chicken pox. It worked, Daniel. My husband got chicken pox and my youngest son got chicken pox. It turned out that they were home together, but it was my little boy who was taking care of his dad.
Wow.
Because my husband got it so bad. Adults, and I gather especially adult men, are not supposed to get chicken pox.
Yeah, knock on wood. I haven't gotten it yet.
So I think, though, that's an example of the kind of challenge and desperation that we can experience. I certainly experienced. And you know what? This whole concept of superwoman, it's a myth. It doesn't exist. Something has got to give.
Mm-hmm. So another question from Romario is, he says, still reading and love it so far. Your books speak to a lot to women empowerment. What lesson can a young Black boy learn from reading your memoir?
I think so I understand that it can seem to lean towards women and their careers and whatever, more so than men. But there are chapters in the book that speak to some of the challenges that young males experience. My sons are two Black males. And so whereas their stories are theirs to tell, what I share in the book also speaks about some of the challenges that Black males experience. I speak, for example, about visiting. I think I have a chapter that speaks to the importance of building strong. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men.
Yes, I love that.
And it's it's about the importance of helping men to feel confident about themselves. Some of the experiences that I have are equally important to men. My parents raised me to believe I was wonderful. They kept telling me I was wonderful, even when I knew on some occasions I wasn't being particularly wonderful. But that told me what they expected. And it caused me to want to live up to their expectations. Okay? This applies to both men and women. I also have said to women who ask me, well, if there's one important tip that you can give us, what would it be? And I say, choose your partner well. But I also give the same tip to males. Males also need to choose their partners well. And as a mother of two sons, that's been very, very important to me. Mm-hmm. And so there are a lot of these tips that I think are unisex, if you like, or not not unique to any particular
True.
gender,
True.
male or female.
True. I think he hasn't gotten that far into the book yet, where he saw those other stories. Maybe that's
Okay.
All right. What is the hardest thing you've had to go through in your life?
My husband says I forget the problems. I forget challenges. As soon as I've gotten over them or, accomplished them, I forget. So that actually is a very hard question for me. I think perhaps one of the biggest problems I've had has to do with the fact that I have a very wimpy back. So it's very easy for me to hurt my back. And it was diagnosed, the condition was diagnosed shortly after I came to Canada. It was diagnosed as scoliosis.
Okay.
That just means, a lot of people have it, but it means it's really easy to hurt yourself. So there are a lot of times that I think of myself as a proverbial duck who looks really, really, really calm above water, but is paddling like crazy below the water. And for me, that is managing pain. And I have never permitted myself to succumb to anything that could lead to an addiction to painkillers. So, I've had colleagues say, "Why are you walking like you have polio?" And it's been on a day when I am hurting, and I think I'm doing pretty good at hiding it, but I'm not. But more often than not, I'm not pain-free, but most other people wouldn't necessarily know.
You remain stoic. All right. What is the greatest lesson you've learned in writing this memoir?
One of the greatest lessons I've learned is the impact that it can have on others, the impact that my story can have on others. And, the endorsements in the front of the book, and also what people have said to me since then, since the book has been in print and they have read it. I guess that tells me I was supposed to write. And I did doubt myself before I started writing. And even at the start, I thought, who's going to want to read that? Isn't it kind of presumptuous for me to think that people might want to read this? And I have heard otherwise. So that has been quite compelling in terms of you had to do this. I had to do this.
Had to be done.
It had to be done.
All right. He says, no, what was the process of writing this memoir?
Okay. A number of people have asked me that. And basically, I started at the beginning, as in the beginning of my story. I was determined that it was not going to be a book that offended anybody else, rather than writing something that would be offensive to someone else. I would just not talk about that. The saying, if you don't have something good to say about someone else, don't say it. I also wanted to focus on people who had helped to define who I am, people who have impressed me along the way. I had a fellow who actually does an amazing job at running a community health center here in Toronto, say that he kept reading to see who was going to be mentioned next. And he just found that really, really exciting. And someone else said to me just within the past few days that one of the things that really stood out for her that she doesn't often see in autobiographies was the fact that I shared the stories of other interesting, exceptional, outstanding, whatever people in the book. And I did so because they have all had an impact on my life. And it really hardly mattered who they were. What I wanted to share was how they impacted my life.
All right. So he says, one more here. Your memoir describes several charitable works that you have done. What was the greatest lesson you learned interacting with those less fortunate? And how has it changed the trajectory of your life?
I just find that the more I know about others, including their challenges, is the more I appreciate my own life. But it also makes me realize that we each have a responsibility to make our lives matter. I think that the world should, this is going to sound really presumptuous, but I think the world should be a better place because I have.
Absolutely.
And I think the way to do that is to help others to achieve their potential. I get a lot of fulfillment out of that.
All right, and this is the last question now.
Okay.
Marianne, what keeps you motivated? What drives you to continue achieving despite what you have already accomplished?
I think as long as I have some value to offer, I should to do what I can to offer that. I also think that from a selfish perspective, I think it keeps me vibrant. I think it keeps me looking forward to waking up every morning. And it causes me to love life.
It keeps you going.
Love life. I love life.
Yeah. All right. And lastly, he says, a big up from Winston Atkins.
So Winston was my boss in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Winston is the man who taught me a lot of what I needed to know about IT. Winston was a really, really, really cool boss. Really cool boss. Love him. Good.
Okay. So we have come to the end of our Q&A session. This was fantastic. I feel upgraded. I feel upgraded. Thanks for upgrading me, Tanya. Thanks for upgrading me. We'll hand it over to the Blue Banyan boss.
Thank you, Daniel. This was a pleasure for me too.
Thank you. Thank you. It's beautiful.
And so it is my absolute pleasure to be joining this conversation at the end. I think I said yes to being the Caribbean publisher for this book before I completed the book. I think I had reached around chapter 3, and then I said, yes, this is the kind of inspiring story that makes a perfect introduction to our Blouse and Skirt memoirs. And so I said, yes, I want this book in our catalog. So it brings me extreme pleasure to have the task of saying thank you to those of us who made this evening possible. So, of course, let me start with, I think we're having some technical problems. Yes? No?
You're good now, Tanya.
No. All right, let me continue that. So first, let me say thank you to Marianne Chambers for having had the courage and the wisdom to live an extraordinary life, and then having had the courage to write about that extraordinary life that we can then share with others. Because I think this is a wonderful story that we're happy to share, and we are blessed to have it in our lives. I also need to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Daniela. Big up yourself. Big up yourself for saying yes so quickly. Big up yourself for calling me when you had just started the book and said, Tanya, away I do. Try make me feel about myself. This lady is so accomplished. Thank you so much for having done a wonderful job. I do appreciate you.
Thank
And
you.
of course, say thank you to the Blue Banyan clan. Jean DaCosta for helming this project. You hold down the fort very well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Marissa Theng, you have been wrangling the tech on our behalf, because everybody know that my idea of computer literacy is to spell the word computer. So thank you so much for being on the team. And of course, Romario, who has been doing a stellar job with our social media posts. Thank you so much. I also want to give, I don't think he's here this evening, but I want to give a special thank you to Scott Fraser, the publisher at Dundurn Press, for inviting us to be a part of this journey by being the Caribbean publisher for this text. I say it again, I believe that From the Heart is a story that every Jamaican should read. And so I say to all of you who have been here with us this evening, I hope you see why. And if you don't see why yet, book. And thank you so much for joining us. Walk good and good up a walk with you.
Bless you.